Welcome to the Content Machine podcast. This week I'm joined by one of our own, Alex Russell. Alex, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for bringing me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
That's great. I'm glad that you're excited about it. So you're going to talk all about video interviews, which is a big part of what you do.
Yeah.
We lost him, folks.
Yeah.
And this week, Alex, you're going to talk to us about how to interview someone for videos, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So can you tell us about your first interview that you did on video?
Yeah. So I say I have a rich history. I'm in my late 20s, but I remember my very first interview in kind of a very embarrassing way. Yes, can I help you?
No, keep going.
Okay, I'll start right there.
This is gonna be...
Sounds like he's making fun of me. It's okay. People can't take me seriously, so this is my fault. You should have had someone else interview me. Not that you're bad at interviewing.
I need all the tips I can get.
Yeah.
So tell us about your first interview.
So, right, my first interview was right at the beginning of high school for me, with the accessibility of video and being able to edit, shoot video rising as I was going through high school. I, believe it or not, was part of what they called APUSH, which is Accelerated, I forgot what it's called. AP History, that's what it is.
Okay.
I had to do a book review about George Washington, and actually by Ron Chernow, famous author of...
I've read that one. That's a good one.
It's a great... Yeah, I didn't read all of it because it was long, and
It is very long.
so I skimmed it, but don't tell my history teacher. So anyway, so we had an option of writing an essay or producing a video as a form of like book review, a book kind of assignment so that we read the book, what we learned. And so that was my first dip into it. A lot of cutaways, a lot of talking to myself. I was very proud of myself. I did a very, some would say like a very like nuanced special effect.
How'd you score on the paper? How'd you score on the video?
The video itself, I did really well. Yeah. So that,
Was encouragement.
it was encouraging for me to be able to do that, but also I think just that experience of making, because even to date, that was one of my earlier videos that I actually set down to produce. I wrote like a basic script, which most of the interviews I do today aren't scripted, but it was the first really structured video that I did, and so it just happened to be an interview with myself.
Yeah.
So, which is totally normal.
So that's high school. What about college? Did you do any interviews during college?
Sure, yeah. So just had some experiences in college where I was able to conduct a few interviews for classes that we did where we would, it was an assignment at the time, but I was able to conduct an interview that, if you look at, which I won't reveal the footage of the high school one because it's really embarrassing because I'm in a
You
wig.
have it?
Yeah, I do have it.
Is it at your parents' house?
No, it's on YouTube. Just so I'm sure somebody can find it if they
First
work hard
person
enough.
to find it, I will give you a $5 Starbucks card.
That's
Leave that in the edit, Eric.
Wow, that would be a lot of work for $5 at Starbucks. But you also get to view it, and some would say that's worth more than anything. So, so in college, right, kind of a level up experience, I was able to produce this interview with, it was like a local artist at the time. For the first time, I was incorporating some significant B-roll, which is just supplementary footage to kind of help push the narrative forward, give some visual examples of what the interviewee is talking about. And so, gained experience from that all the way up to, I had a multi-year long internship with a local church media team where we would conduct a lot of testimony videos that they would do within the church setting. And so, which is probably where I learned the most, because I was able to, in that kind of setting, this wasn't like, in student settings, it's very forgiving, right? If you mess up, and, the person you're working with, for my example, was also a student. So in some ways it was kind of like, it felt very like easy breezy. But for the first time at the church, I was dealing with stories that were very like, that had a lot of meaning. Not that the interview I did with the artist didn't, but this one had implications
People's
that were
lives and serious and heavy and
very personal. Yeah. And so I think that's where I actually learned a lot about how impactful an interview can be. Because like I said, both of those prior interviews, although they were fun and they were great for experience, they didn't really provide me, they didn't really have that. And some of that was on my part being so novice in it, but it didn't have that impact that I realized later that interviews can have.
So Alex, what's like the first thing that you tell an interviewee when they come into the room?
What I tell them, I usually, after they get settled, try to, make sure they're as comfortable as they can be when they're in front of the camera. But there's this, before I start any interview, there is a anecdote that I commonly go back to, which is, if I were to ask you, this is it, by the way, I'm not continuing what I'm saying. This is the actual, so
Okay. All right.
so tune in, this is it. If I were to ask you what color the sky is, and you just said
Blue.
blue, which is a great answer. That's, it could be true. However, what I tell the interviewee is within the editing process, right? Although that answer is true and the answer is good, it sounds very confusing without all the context of what I asked question-wise. So all the people watching the video are going to know is that you said the word blue, which could be anything. Could be
Color of a dog.
color of a dog. Could be the color of your favorite candy. Like it's
Color of your clues.
color of your clues. Yeah. I don't think we can bring up Blue's Clues. But anyway, yeah, there's so many blue objects in the world. Like who knew that I was talking about the sky? And so this exercise of, if I asked you what color the sky is, it's a opportunity to teach the interviewee how, when they answer a question that's being asked, it teaches them that adding some context, or repeating the question a little bit to add context to their answer, can be really helpful when conducting the edit, or can be really helpful when putting together the edit. It creates that context that without it, can just make it where the answer is not as usable. Because, like I said, like without the context of asking or knowing that I asked what color the sky is, the answer blue doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So instead, maybe they could say the sky is blue when they answer, or like providing some of that context.
That could make an entire interview be very different for editing purposes, right? It could go from a useless interview to a very useful interview.
Right. Because without it, you could totally lose that answer. You totally, just have no use for it. And especially like when people are starting to answer a question, sometimes they say some really good stuff at the beginning, and it's just such a great sadness whenever that answer is just not
Usable later.
usable
Yeah.
without that context.
Yeah. And it's hard to hear that in the moment too, because like you might think you got this awesome answer because you heard the context, and then when you go watch it out of context, you're like, oh, I can't do anything with this.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is great for comedy, but not great
Not
for
great for editing videos.
editing videos.
What are some do and do nots of interviews?
So one of the do's that I stick to pretty commonly is how I try to make sure the guest is as comfortable as possible, encouraging them, really, because you have to realize most people in their lives, sometimes even, some might do it just semi-regularly, but oftentimes this might be their first time on camera, first time doing an interview. And so naturally, you're going to be, if you're the one being interviewed, you're going to be pretty uncomfortable. You're going to be under the lights, and that pressure is really going to start getting to your head. So one of the things that I encourage them with is, thankfully they don't have to look at the camera when it comes to interview. They look at me. Oftentimes that creates a more natural conversation feel.
Yeah, because they feel like they're talking to you and not talking to a camera.
Right. Which talking to the camera can be very like whole black hole experience of like, am I actually talking to somebody? Like, where do I look? Can be very disorienting. It also keeps the eye contact from being directly into the lens, which when you watch a video when you're watching a video where someone has been looking directly in the lens, you'll get this effect where they're like almost talking directly towards you, which is great for some videos, but for a lot of interviews, you want to be like, I'm catching this interview from like a bystander perspective.
Gotcha. Yeah. And then do you go in with a script for interviews?
In the hopes of being more of an authentic experience, the interviews themselves are not too scripted to a T. Usually there's outlines to kind of add some direction. Sometimes I'll even share that with the interviewee just to give them some comfort of where we're going, how many questions they're going to be. Because, once you start, it's like sometimes they could be like, how long is this going to be? Like, I don't want to be here for another hour. Like, they can keep up with the direction of the interview. And so there is generally a rough outline, but as far as like a full script goes, it's very bare bones because we want it to, again, that kind of conversational aspect of the interview. We don't want it to control the narrative at all. We don't want to make it so that the person feels like they have to say a certain thing, and kind of being willing to follow the interviewee if it's appropriate, right? If it's not too much of a tangent, because then, there's so much you can prepare for an interview. But if the interviewee surprises you, you might end up in a more unique perspective that you just, even...
Yeah, wouldn't even know it was there.
Yeah, not at all. So that's something that's always important to do, is just be ready to be loosey-goosey, creative. Don't get too strict on...
Yeah, you can go off book if you like, are you saying like if you see a path that's maybe off the question you'd planned because they've said something, that could be a great opportunity to get another piece of insight that you hadn't planned on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything we should avoid when we're doing interviews?
Yes.
Great.
Okay.
Well, that's been the Content Machine podcast. Is there anything we shouldn't do when we're recording an interview?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's, numerous things. Some things that come to mind, though, right, is to, I mentioned earlier, definitely don't want to manipulate someone's answer, but don't be afraid if someone needs help finding out what they want to say. I think there's some fear of that where like, you're talking with them kind of a little bit off to the side of an interview of like, you're working through a question that you just asked them and they just seem so lost, which happens because, again, there's that pressure and you want to make them feel comfortable. And so sometimes some people need some of that direction where, of course, you want to preface it with, I don't want to, force you to say this, but see if you can figure out what direction they might be trying to go in to encourage them to be like, okay, you can go that direction, go down that avenue of answering the question that way, if that's what's true to them. And I think, because so much, if you're just throwing questions at them and they're just like, I have no idea, it's not very helpful to just keep throwing questions and them just, already in an uncomfortable situation, they're feeling like, oh, I can't answer these, like, I need a lifeline. So being that lifeline is something that's, that you want to make sure you're not straying away from, even as the interviewer, My other don't is something that it's a personal problem for me. I have the tendency to, especially when I'm meeting a new person, even something as small as like a waiter or waitress, like I want to like create this kind of small talk atmosphere that makes them feel like, okay, I can talk here. Like we're having like a casual conversation. But don't ask them too many questions that are off topic, right? And, there's some time at the beginning to do that as they're walking in, you're having small talk. But while it's good to be creative and take not tangents, but follow their direction as they're talking, right? You don't want to end up somewhere where you're talking about something totally different, even for the sake of being a conversationalist or just being a nice and cheery person of wanting to have a conversation with them. Don't let that. There's some professionalism there where it's important to, make sure that the interview is not becoming so casual that you miss the point of the whole interview. And so that's something that, you have to really reel it in sometimes, even if your natural tendency is to, not
Just keep talking.
Yeah, keep talking.
Well, let's say you get that really good interview. What's the value of one of those really good interviews?
So the impact of a good conducted interview has the result of offering this unique perspective, whether it's for, you could be interviewing for a company for their website. Maybe it's for a program that they've started. Maybe they're just talking about what it's like to work for this company or this nonprofit in a way that you can't really get across as personally as, a bullet list of facts of like, we treat our coworkers like this. We have this percentage. Those are great for understanding purposes, but to hear it come from a person like directly from them, from their experience, means so much because we, as people, we relate to that. We relate to experiences and we relate to what a person goes through in so many different ways. And so having a good interview is when you are able to allow that person you're interviewing to really truly speak and truly share their own perspective that is unique to them, but also conveys a message that speaks well of, whatever the purpose of the interview is, whether it's promoting an event, whether it's promoting a business itself, or just get people to understand why this is important. Maybe it's the subject or it's the matter that they're talking about. So I think, right, the best way to convey the importance of something is giving it that human experience, and really displaying that can be really impactful.
Well, Alex, thank you for joining us on the podcast today. Appreciate your insight. You do great interviews. So if you want to see some of Alex's interviews, you can visit our website, adelsbergermarketing.com. And we appreciate you guys checking out the Content Machine podcast. Subscribe, and we'll have new episodes very soon.